Yeah, so the group, we had a 4.5-hour work day on, I think that was Friday. On Friday, we had 4.5 hours. 2 hours of film session, 2 hours on the floor, and then we got a half hour of weights. So I think, it was productive, and just trying to shore up, the areas that at this stage of the season become, more and more important. So defensive focus, and then last night we did some film work and preparation work on Minnesota. And got 2 practices here, shoot around on Wednesday as we get ready for a big game.
Last season, there were so many close games against teams that ended up making the tournament. Nova and Creighton, and Wisconsin, Syracuse, and games that any of them could have gone either way, and one, maybe 2 of them could have changed the whole tenor of the season.
Sure.
How much, I guess, have you talked to the guys about, you potentially have 2 games here that could end up being great resume wins? Mm-hmm. Is that something that...
Yeah, I think the bigger thing we always amplify, it probably goes back to my time with Coach Wooden, is improving in every aspect of play. And if we can do that, the winning is a byproduct. And but I think inherently in college athletics, everyone understands winning's important. So it's, you can almost underscore that. We know that the objective every game out is to win. But the important thing is, how do we win? And when we're successful, why are we successful? And when we're not successful, why are we not successful? And that's maturation. That's a process. And I think this group has a better understanding of that, this week than they did last week, and next week than they will this week, and more this year than they did last year. That's what you're looking for, and you as a coach, your goal is to accelerate that understanding as quickly as possible. But there are some things that you can't rush, and you learn through experience. And I think this is a group that has been able to demonstrate a propensity for learning, and that's why I enjoy working with them. So, I think this is a big weekend. It will be similar to an NCAA tournament from the standpoint. It's a great venue, strong competition. Play on Wednesday, and less than 48 hours later, you have to turn around and come back against a team with a different style of play, and compete again to try and get a win. So I think this will be a great opportunity for us. We'll get, as we like to say, get an early season report card of where we are, a better sense of what we need to work on and what some of our strengths are. So we're looking forward to it.
Steve, I know that you'd like to have your team playing the best that it can by the end of the season.
Sure.
And that your teams usually travel an arc of improvement.
Sure.
Last year, winning those 10 out of 13,
Sure.
Clearly it did that.
Sure.
But it got to the steep part of the arc too late.
Sure. Yeah.
Is there a way, are there measures that are being taken so that maybe they're further up the arc already coming into this?
That's one of those you wish you had. That's the, that's like, if I had the, if there was a button to push, as a coach, you would love to be able to push it. In my experience, the 27 years I've been in this racket, it's something that is a process, and each team is so different. Even when you return a group of players from the previous year, it's a different team because they've changed, because they're human beings and they're athletes that are, in a time in their life where they're developing and growing, and so it's fluid, it's dynamic, and one team is not necessarily the same team the following year, even if the majority of the personnel returns. So, in my experience, you continue. I've been fortunate that, the 10 full years I've coached, we go to the postseason 9 times, So that's the goal, to get to the postseason. The NCAA tournament is the ultimate goal. We've been fortunate to do that 7 of the 10 times, and 9 overall we've gotten to the postseason. So I wish I could say it was like a set kind of boilerplate approach that we take, and you could then put the pedal to the metal and elevate it, But I really have done the same thing our approach has really been the same. And then either the team gets hot, as we have a number of times, and plays their best basketball and makes runs the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, or they don't. And oftentimes it's derailed by injuries. When I look at what derailed, the majority of the seasons I've coached, it was Baron Davis injury one year, Dan Gazaric injury another year, Jelani McCoy, who I lost another year, so 2 6'10" centers, and Baron DJ Kennedy another year. Even Chris Obekba's injury last year, we won whatever it was 9 out of 10 before he got injured. So, that's the other thing, is even though you're trying to accelerate it, there's also the variables and the elements that come into play that you can't anticipate. And for us, it's been injuries. If I look at my 10 years, 5 times we lost someone either the week before the NCAA tournament or in the NCAA tournament. DJ was a week before, Gazaric was a week before, Barron was in the NCAA tournament, McCoy was a week before the NCAA tournament. So sometimes it's also being fortunate. Coaches always say that. It sounds like coach speak and cliche or trite. But the reason they tell those stories is they've coached long enough to know seasons get derailed by an injury. But I like where this team is, and we understand that each game is important. We want to win all the games, and the more successful we are now, the more successful we are in November and December helps set the table for what we want to do in February and March. That's the most simple way to say it, right? So, and we're aware of that, as we always are. But I think, with experience comes a certain degree of maturity. And I think this group, because of their experience, has a more mature perspective. Does that necessarily translate to wins? Not always. Because I've had really young teams that won, I've had old teams that lost. So at the end of it, that's not a guarantee either. It's like every year, just a group you hope continues to get better and plays basketball that allows you to win enough games to participate in the NCAA tournament and then be playing your best at that time of the year.
I think that last season, maybe it was a tournament that involved Penn State that came around this time of year.
Yeah.
So you guys were stepping up a classification, I guess you could say, then. When you look at your guys today,
right,
in the locker room when you're talking to them,
yeah,
do you see differences in them, in their either level of understanding or the way that they interact with you about the game plan that's different from, say, a year ago?
Yeah, I would say the difference just in general over the course of their career, I'd say one of the things that jumps out is that we can give them, we can put more on their shoulders in terms of adjustments that we make from, game to game, or from timeout to timeout, or first half to second half. And that's helpful, because with a younger team, you don't want to short circuit them, to a point where they're thinking, and as a result, take away their aggressiveness, their intuitiveness, and so that's a fine line, and the ideal is to get to a place where you can make those adjustments, make modifications, but not create a paralysis from analysis, as a lot of coaches like to talk about. So Coach Tark used to always, say that, the more an athlete thinks, the slower their feet and reaction time are. And there's no doubt, any of us in any aspect of life, if we begin to think too much, it can inhibit, the natural gifts or abilities, right? You guys should appreciate that more than with writing, And, you know, either you get in that flow and you're in that zone, and the gifts, the abilities, the sensibilities are all working in concert. And then there are other times where it just comes to a halt, and you're stifled, you feel paralyzed, you know, inhibited. And I think it's in any walk of life, I think that's the fine line there. As a coach, you're trying to get your players to perform at their highest abilities, closer to the full expression of their potential. And each player is different, and each team you have year to year is different. And so how you tinker, like the alchemist, you know, with those groups and with those individuals determines how well we're going to play. And I think this is a group now. We can make some adjustments from game to game, or even how we're going to defend an on-ball screen, or, you know, doubling onto the post, you know, in different ways, from covering underneath, covering down from the top, or changing our defenses, you know, and their ability to, you know, to execute, you know, on offense or defense, you know, different schemes and alignments is at a higher level, because they're older and more mature.
You talked about some injuries before. How has Chris's ankle been since the other night?
Good. It's still a little tender, but, you know, we expect him to play.
Everyone else healthy?
Yeah, I haven't checked with Ron today to see, you know, if there's anything new in terms of the infirmary, but from what I can tell, you know, D'Angelo has had a groin, a little bit of issue with his groin, some tenderness there, some kind of groin pull, and back bump, as we know. Felix has been banged up a little bit with his ankles. Christian Jones' knee, you know, but we expect everyone to play.
D'Angelo said that, you know, the team hasn't played up to its capabilities yet. And
I hope not.
yeah. And, you know, he also described, I guess, the excitement, the anxiousness to play in a higher profile game,
Sure,
like the ones this week. How much do you think the two are connected in the fact that sometimes when you see a smaller program, it's just natural, you know, human, you know,
Right.
emotion to kind of let down a little bit, and then it takes a little bit to get going? Do you think that was maybe
I mean,
something the
I think,
first?
I know, you know, I'm always so close to, you know, you tend to operate in a vacuum. As a broadcaster, you get that wider angle lens because you're covering basketball coast to coast, as I was able to for 7 years. It's really helpful because, you know, you're just seeing different tendencies and trends and patterns from a broader view, as opposed to just being focused on the Purdue team or the UCLA team. You know, we're now back to the St. John's team. And so you see the Nebraska-Omaha knocking off, you know, Marquette. And, you know, Buffalo taking Kentucky to, lead at halftime, whatever that was. You know. And you know, last night watching UCLA, you know, so it's you understand that it's such a fine line now, the margin, you know, not just in our country, but even international basketball. It's a very razor thin margin for error. The difference between a major college program and a mid-major is razor thin now. And that wasn't the case 30, 40, 50 years ago, you know, probably even 20 years ago. So, hence the teams like Gonzaga, and, you know, the great runs in the tournament by the Valpos and the George Masons and, you know, VCUs, and, you know, so I don't, you know, it's like I don't even look anymore at a team like, well, they're from a smaller conference, so, you know, it's just basketball, you know, about just I think it's a good thing overall too, that there's, you know, other than maybe Kentucky and a handful, 3 or 4 or 5 other programs, really everyone else is it's very thin. You know, what determines an NCAA tournament first NIT berth is usually a free throw or a layup. You know, regardless of what programs or conferences or levels they're supposedly at, the size of their school, it's usually a free throw or one stop, you know, or a hot hand or a bounce the ball, an official's call that determines this team's going to the tournament, this team's not, you know. So it's other than those, you know, the traditional blue blood powers that are just, you know, at just a whole nother level. But then everyone else is, it's very, very competitive. So, so I think that's you know, the challenge always in coaches, how to get your team to play to the best of their abilities, you know, on a consistent basis. And that's what we're after every day. That's the challenge. So, and to do that while you're losing guys to the NBA and, you know, the myriad, the multitude of other challenges that we face, and that's what we get up every morning for, you know, to fight that fight, you know, try to make that happen.
At this point, we're talking about the fourth game of the season. How much of the preparation for this game is you working on your own team, and how much of it is looking at Minnesota and ways to take them out of
Both. I think it's a balance. You clearly need to, you know, prepare your team for what we're going to face against Minnesota, but then also amplify, you know, our strengths and what we do. Because if we're going to win, at the end of it, the most important thing is how we play. Yet you're mindful of, you know, what you can take away, you know, based on our, you know, defensive schemes, what we can take away from Minnesota, or what we think we can exploit against Minnesota's defense, or what we do offensively. And then there's, you know, broader aspects as well, you know, in terms of how fast a team plays or how strong they are, you know, but that kind of gets back to strengths and vulnerabilities and how we can try and exploit an opponent's vulnerabilities and use our strengths, you know, to position ourselves to win and try and offset or neutralize their strengths, you know. So you're always trying to kind of impose, you know, we're trying to impose our own preferred, you know, style of play, whether that's pace, tempo, our personnel, in a manner that will, you know, over 40 minutes allow us to win a game against a particular opponent. You know? And easier said than done. That's the dance right there, though. Because they're trying to do the same thing to us. They're trying to impose their preferred style of play and tempo on us so that their team can get the win.
So far, Coach, what are some of the things that have impressed you, and what are some of the things that you think could be improved upon?
You know, I think I like our overall, you know, the pace and the tempo that our team plays at. I think we give opponents some things to think about because of our personnel and the pace that we prefer to play at. I think, you know, I like the interchangeable parts. When you look at our personnel, we have a number of, you know, players that bring the ball up the floor, that can play make and shot make. Defensively, because we have some interchangeable parts, we can do some things in terms of switching to disrupt the flow or the rhythm of the opponent. And I think we just need to, defensively, we need to get better at our help side. Rebounding is always going to be something we have to do collectively. You know, Chris is someone that could be a dominant rebounder, but then we have to join the party and help him at both ends of the floor on the glass. And we're not going to be able to do it with size at this stage. Our bigs are still coming along in terms of development, and we want to continue to, you know, utilize our bench and try and get more minutes for Christian Jones and Felix and Miles Stewart and Amar, and you know, depending where we are with Adonis, you know, even in the fall with Joey, you know, next month with Joey. Not the fall, next month. So I think, you know, developing our bench, and you know, but also the bench has to be productive, you know, because if they don't produce, then it's difficult to justify more minutes, you know. So the tough thing about being a reserve is you got to show it in practice to earn the minutes in a game, and then you have to be productive with those minutes in a game to develop a longer road. Because we're also trying to win games. You know, as I remind them, it's not T-ball. You know, we keep track of the runs and the outs. And so I'd love to play all of them equally. The reality is there's only so many minutes to go around in a game, and we have to try and, you know, get the W. But I also want to develop our bench. So those six, really at this point, take the majority of the minutes, starting five and Jamal. But then we want to build out Christian, Felix, Miles Stewart, Armar, and then depending, Joey will be eligible next month, and then we'll know more on Adonis, Did I forget one there? But that's pretty much the number for us, right? So, Jay Henderson at this point is someone that, might be able to help us, but I'm trying to figure out, is it better to redshirt him? Or I also don't want to waste someone's year of eligibility, because he's got a promising future here. And actually had probably the best week of practice. He probably practiced well as anybody this week. So, but you have to be careful because off one or two practices, if you play a kid, then his year is, he's used a year up, and he might really need that year on the back end, or could get more out of that year on the back end in his fifth season. So that's a personnel kind of more of a general manager perspective. Put my hat on there and try to figure out, okay, what's right now we need for this particular season in terms of the parts, the rotations, distribution of minutes, identification of roles for each player, but then there's also the larger roster of, okay, and I think right now Miles, because of his shot, he's as kind of smooth a shot as any player I've coached. At 6'5", 6'6", he can see over the top of defenses, and he keeps it pretty simple. If he has a shot, he nails it. If not, he gets rid of it and passes. And he's pretty efficient or purposeful with his bounce. He understands how to play at Westchester High School at exam. He's one of the best in the country in terms of schooling, young talent. So Miles has kind of carved out a role because he's similar to what Max did last year. He's someone that come in and bang shots from all angles, does it on a regular basis. And then with Jay, I think he can do some things defensively to help us. He's an adequate shooter and a really good athlete. But I think we'll have a better sense of that in the next week or two based on practices and games and what happens here.